So I have not read any of the final tribal council, but I feel like I can probably still do the podcast without that knowledge.
Yeah, I don't think we'll talk too much about like what's going on at final anyway.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, mainly like a catch up of the week, since I think the last book was Sunday, so that would have been before the double.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
So we have a lot to catch up on with that, but we'll try to go through it. Let me do the intro and then I guess we'll get to it.
Sounds good.
All right, 32 days, 24 All-Stars, 1 co-host and 1 podcast. This is your host, Poody, and I'm joined today by Loveita, aka Lara.
Hello. I'll say in English today.
Today we'll be talking through the final 9 tribal council up through the final 2. So to cover, a lot of intrigue happened this final week. I think one of our best final weeks we've ever had. No shortage of gameplay for sure. They definitely backloaded this season with drama and gameplay.
Yes. I can't say that the final 2 are too much of a surprise. Like they could be kind of expected, but the path that took us there is not how I would have expected it to go. Not
at all. And it really improved my opinion of the entire season this past week. I think this was the meat and potatoes that we were waiting for. So let's get into it and talk about that double tribal on Sunday. We kind of suspected Baden and Daisy would be targeted. I did not expect the craziness that ensued. So the first council, Baden went home, which I thought was weird. I thought Baden would go home as like the easy second tribal boot, but he seemed to be the easy consensus first tribal boot, which is still weird to me. But Baden gets a unanimous vote off, almost.
Well, it wasn't unanimous. Daisy voted. Right. Daisy voted differently than everybody else, but Baden forgot to vote. So it looked unanimous, and everybody thought Daisy forgot to vote.
Right.
Kind of blamed her for that and thought she wasn't like on top of her stuff.
Did she know that he was going home? I feel like she didn't.
I don't think she did. She thought it might have been a blindside on her. She had actually, she said a few times, she wrote a goodbye message in her notes app during the first tribal council. She thought it was her getting blindsided. And she did get blindsided, but it wasn't her that left that tribal.
Yeah, and then she ends up getting blindsided in the second tribal council, as did all of the players and all of the hosts and lurkers. I was completely shook. Did not see that coming at all. It was thrilling to watch live. I thought a potentially game-winning move happened when all the votes were going on Daisy. It was very obvious she was supposed to go home. And Ben decides to play his public immunity idol. It was public, although I don't know how many people had it on their radar. He plays his idol for Daisy, canceling out all her votes, and they target Sarah, which I thought was a very smart move, but a very unexpected, like completely unexpected. I had no idea that was coming.
It was a complete shock. Ben himself, I don't think, decided to do it until halfway through the second tribal council. And I thought it was a super smart move of his. You know, how else are you going to use a public idol? There's kind of, we've seen the pattern. Somebody gets a public idol and then they're able to bluff with it for a while. And then they finally play it on themselves because they're either forced to or they just burn it. Nothing really ends up happening with it. I don't think you normally see public idols used on somebody else, do we?
Yeah, especially for like a blindside.
They were so comfortable giving him this plan. And he's like, well, I can do whatever I want with this plan. I know exactly how you guys are voting.
Yeah, a really big oversight on their part and really fantastic gameplay for Ben. I thought, it was funny. The parallels between this season and the first Austranded became a little bit more apparent here, where Joaquin notoriously idled out Moana, I think. I'm pretty sure it was Moana. But that was like his game-winning move, where he was kind of under the radar, playing okay, but just social. And once he made that idol play, he instantly became a front runner. It improved his position. It gave him some bonus points in front of a jury on a very over the top gameplay season. And so I thought, I mean, this was very close to being a repeat of that. I thought, hell, maybe the way to win Austranded is to idle someone at the final 7, It was wild. And we'd seen Flicka do similar impulsive things in the past. Not impulsive, but things that you should do, I think, when you're
big
playing
moves,
a game.
You're making a statement.
I don't even know if it's that so much as like a move. You're making a move. And it all too often people don't, right?
Or they're not visible. Yeah.
We've seen people go home this season with idols or just wasting their idols or, nothing happening because they're playing it safe. And, maybe that works for some people, but I don't know if it gets you the win.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that later tonight when we discuss the final 2, because I think that point is going to come up again.
Yeah, and Ben knew that at that point, final 7, final 8, like he didn't have the best social game. He had this public idol. For some reason, nobody tried to flush the idol during the double tribal because, they weren't thinking about that at all. Kind of forgot it existed. And so it kind of looked like he was just going to, be able to keep it until 6, hopefully win a couple immunities, use it when he didn't have immunity and use it to get himself further. But as you said, that's not how you win a game, to just keep your idol until final 6 and play it if you don't need to.
Right. Especially an all-star game. That distinction needs to be made, because I think you can win that way. In a regular season, it's hard, but you can, because people aren't expecting the flashiest of moves. But to win an all-stars, I think you have to have something you've done to point to, and it can't just be you were likable.
Yeah, a Scooby-Doo reveal is never going to work in an all-star season.
No, and people want someone to win who has played an impressive game. They don't want to lose to someone who just played it safe.
Especially because a lot of these jurors, they are impressive people. They've played very good games in the past. They played a good game this season. They want, something tangible to kind of like point to. And they say, this is why I voted for this person to win.
Right. So Sarah goes home, completely unexpected. I think it was a brilliant move for Flicka, because she's someone who I thought stood a very good shot at winning.
Definitely.
So it was a really good insight for him to get rid of that under the radar threat. The next tribal council, another big under the radar threat, ends up getting blindsided. I was totally blindsided here because I thought for sure Michelle was going to play her idol at this tribal council, but she wanted to ride it through.
I know. So yeah, so the lead up to this round, Michelle and Gerard are kind of pushing Ben. He's the big challenge guy, even though I don't know. I think that was just a perception thing. I don't think he was actually that beast at challenges compared to everybody. But
right.
Ben and Daisy were trying to target Gerard, and then David and Sharon say, you know what, we're going to push Michelle instead. And so for the longest time, my question that night was, will Michelle find out her name's out? Because I would think that it's final 7, the second you hear that you might be an alternate vote, 2 votes, 1 vote, doesn't matter. Play that idol. You've got one more round to play it.
Right.
Like, play it when you're getting a couple of votes. And so I just thought, I thought they were playing really well. Nobody knew. And then later, about 15, 20 minutes before the round started, Matt tells Gerard that there is a push for Michelle that he doesn't think is working. And Gerard passes that on to Michelle, so she knows her name is out there, and she decides not to play the idol. Goes home 5-2.
Do we remember who pushed it? Was it Sharn and David?
Yes. Yeah, it was David and Sharn kind of together.
This is really where we see them come together. Yes.
They've had a lot of... David and Sharn's relationship throughout this season has been really interesting to watch. I was really rooting for them to be the final 2 because, they worked really closely together. Then David betrayed Sharn, and then Sharn betrayed David. And then they kind of had this, will we, won't we thing going on. And then they really came together here to push Michelle. David pushed Michelle to Matt, and Sharn pushed Michelle to Ben, and Daisy just kind of had to go along with it, even though she really wanted Gerard out.
Yeah, very unfortunate for Michelle, who I thought played a phenomenal game. I'm
so good.
I'm not surprised she went out, because I think her target was getting too big. And I actually think had she played an idol, she would have had to win out on challenges. And I don't know if that was in the cards. I mean, certainly Donnie is a beast at challenges, but so are a lot of people, and some of them are pretty random. So I actually think
that's definitely the big dilemma.
Right. I mean, she plays the idol, saves herself, then she's definitely target number 1 anyway. Right. So
yeah. And I think that was kind of her argument why she didn't play it. She was kind of like, well, if all these people idol betrayed me anyway, and I have the majority vote on me, playing the idol is just going to prolong it one more day. And
It's
if
tough.
I play it and I don't need it, will I then become the target because I played the idol, and they'll think that made me, a huge thing when I didn't need it.
It's tough because I think by that point it's too late. I think she's already labeled as the bigger threat to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to change that with, I think aside from being under the radar, which then you don't have a great shot to win. I mean, that's how she lost last time. So really
it's such a difficult balance.
Yeah, especially All-Stars are weird. But regardless of all that, I really thought she played a fantastic game. I think she was a front runner, and I was happy that she was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she played incredible.
So then the next tribal council is a blindside on Matt, who I don't know if he was necessarily super shocked, but I do know this was one of Sharn's big moments, and then we see several more of those coming up in the following few days. But also David betraying Matt was a big deal, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, that was interesting because he technically never had to betray Matt. Sharn let him in on all the plans, and she had his consent to use her leave tribal council advantage on him. But she didn't, I don't think she would have trusted him. I don't think he would have voted out Matt at that tribal council had he been there. I don't think he would have written Matt's name down.
Right. And I have to commend, this was like Sharn's stamp on the season as, okay, she's not going to be under the radar, invisible. I mean, which we knew, but this was like her coming out as the player that we know she is. So she plays her advantage on David, who has to leave tribal council without a vote, which I thought was a baller move. I didn't even think of that advantage being played that way. I mean, I don't know why I didn't, but it's such a cool way to play it, a smart way to play it.
I love that. Yeah, I love the use of that advantage. Instead of sending yourself out of tribal council, self-preservation, using it to get somebody you don't necessarily trust on the vote out to make sure the outcome you want goes home. Now, there's a huge risk with that. I mean, somebody plays a leave tribal council, I say, hey, wait, why are we not voting this person out?
Right. I mean, you really
they just played an advantage and left themselves vulnerable.
Right. I mean, that's the inherent risk, but I respect the hell out of that move because that is ballsy.
Yeah.
And she really weaponized that twist, which we didn't even think how that was going to work. And I thought it was awesome. And then after that, you had Matt, who was completely shook by that, decide to change his vote and try to get something together. It's a blindside. I don't even remember who.
Daisy. There was some talk about maybe it being a vote on Ben or Gerard. We're being told each other, and then tried to switch it to Daisy last second when David left to see if he could maybe get Ben and Gerard both on Daisy. And just everybody just thought, you're too big of a threat at this point, Matt. And to be frank, he was. Matt is another person who played an amazing game this season, just from the get-go, hit the ground running, was in everybody's ear, really ran things for a majority of the game, but could not keep that threat level under wraps.
Yeah, this final, I mean, there's so much impressive scrambling going on, not even just at Tribal Council, but before. I'm sure these guys are exhausted because there is so much gameplay happening this final week, which usually you don't see. Usually it's pretty straightforward final week where you just got to get rid of one or two people who are the biggest threats. Everyone was a big threat. So I do not envy their position. They end up getting rid of Matt, going along with Sharn's plan. Unfortunately for Matt. I was super impressed with Tommy. Shout out to him this season. Fantastic game, as you said, and as everyone could obviously see. So then we have our final five, very exciting final five. And I was not expecting this at all, but that tribal council was so lit. David, we're seeing the fruit of the David and Sharn alliance drama come out because those two have a weird competitive collaboration going on is what I would call it. They're both they know that they're snakes and they know they're just playing the best that they can, but they still kind of respect each other and like each other. So they're working together when it's convenient. And this whole season we saw Daisy was basically Sharn's back pocket vote. And I was expecting this tribal council to go where Sharn was going to get rid of probably Ben, I thought. Yeah. That did not happen. Sharn first of all, David created a fake advantage, assuming he was going to be in trouble, and decided to use the fake extra vote as a way to bluff through this final five and get rid of who he wanted, which was Daisy. And he whipped that out of tribal council. Sharn says she knew about that it was fake, and that that did affect her decision one way or the other. I don't know that I believe that. I thought in the middle of tribal council, I'm pretty sure she switched her vote.
Yeah, he made the push literally 10 minutes into tribal council, where I think
impressive.
The votes were on Ben, and he messages Sharn, I think, and is just like, hey, I don't think we should get rid of Ben after all. I really think it should be Daisy. And she just said okay and did it, which really I do think is what put the edge over on David over Sharn, because I do agree that I think Daisy might have betrayed Sharn further down the line, not wanted her in the end with her. Maybe even would have seen David as a better pick to take to the end. I'm not sure how Daisy would have gone forward had she made it further. But I think Daisy staying would have been better for Sharn.
I agree. I think getting rid of Daisy was David's potentially, depending on how this plays out tonight, we still don't know, potentially his game-winning move. And I know he got a ton of shit for it.
Yes, nobody really expected Daisy to go there because they all kind of thought she was a lock for the end. I think they were jury was expecting a final 3 at this point. You know, there's final 5 left. They all expected that the 3 of David, Ben, and Sharn would probably each be jockeying to get to final 3 with Daisy and Gerard there. And instead, Daisy leaves.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give kudos to David as well, because he's really the only one who sussed that there might be a final 2.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been, or at least he's the only one who was very vocal about that throughout all of his planning. So he had a contingency plan just in case. Whereas I don't think anyone else even had that on their radar, or at least dismissed it immediately.
Right.
Which I think is why he's there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So Daisy goes home. The next tribal council is the final one. They assumed it was going to be the final tribal council before the final tribal council, the penultimate council, I guess. But it ended up being a double, where we went from 4 to 2 instead of 4 to 3.
And that had its own excitement.
Super exciting. I mean, the whole thing, every moment of this season was fantastic. This Final 4 Tribal Council, they had a push to a tie. We had a tie. David defected and teamed up with Ben, told Ben last minute, all right, vote for Sharn. So David and Ben voted for Sharn, his good buddy. Sharn and Gerard voted for Ben. Neither Gerard nor David changed their vote, so we ended up with a tie-breaking challenge at Final 4. Completely shocked, and even more shocking,
Sharn won it.
Sharn won it, like handedly won it. I think a kudos to her social game on that one, because I don't think Ben had a very strong one where he would know like who did what.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she scored like higher than most people have ever scored in that challenge, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to say like the few times we've done that, the most people gets like 2 or 3. And I think she got like 5.
Jeez.
Or 4. So she handedly won that, which I loved because the final 3 was delicious. We had David and Gerard, who just screwed over Sharn. Sharn kind of knew it was written on the wall, so she was pissed that it was the final 2. Because otherwise she'd be in the final 3 and potentially could win. It would have been close, but she had a very, very good shot at winning.
Definitely. I was really rooting for her in that final immunity challenge, man. Like, because it sucks to be in that position where it's basically like, okay, I either win the game, I could win the game here by winning this challenge, or I lose everything.
It does suck. It also sucks that this is Austranded and not Stranded, because if it was Stranded, it would be a final 3.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm kind of angry that it wasn't a final 3, because I would have loved to crown Rudy the winner, but that's not what we planned. That's not what Austranded is. So, unfortunately, it's a final 2, and David beats this challenge. So, David decides to send home his good buddy Sharn. Yeah, by like
he
a lot.
destroys this challenge. I mean, he bids all his coins for an advantage he doesn't even need, because he's the first person to submit and submits it perfectly.
So David votes out Sharn, legendary player Rudy. I thought I was depressed because I was like, oh, Rudy finally is going to get his win after like so many close calls. But yet again, Rudy is bridesmaid here.
It would have been so epic.
I will say, though, there's another poetic side to this, in that David narrowly lost to Lucy by losing this challenge in his season. So the fact that he was able to win it and got out Sharn in this similar situation to where he got out before and lost the season, I think is kind of beautiful as well. I especially loved I got emotional reading it, his confessional about his loss and his layoff from Stranded, because we hadn't seen much from Drew in that time period. After Turks and Caicos, where he loses that final immunity by not posting in each section of the challenge where you're supposed to.
Oh, like Ben's mess up in the box.
Yes, so he had to go back and post in them, and in that time he went back to posting them. Lucy got into the final and then won the whole season.
Wow.
And he was going to win that. So, he said after that season he was kind of depressed about it. He was over it. He was like, I'm done with the orgs anyway. So it just left a bad taste in his mouth, he said. And then something interesting happened because, as we all know, Lucy passed away a year after, almost to the date. And he said, it really put into perspective of how that wasn't my time to win. That was Lucy's time to win. And it meant a lot more in retrospect. And I just thought it was beautiful that now he's coming back and this is his time to win.
Yeah.
Or is about to be. And I'm a firm believer in that, things happening at the right time for different people. And I think this is a beautiful ending to that story as well. So as much as I would have loved Rudy to win, I think a lot of these guys have those stories. Even Gerard has that story where he's played, I think Austranded might have been one of his first orgs, or at least his favorite org. And he was super excited just to come back. And so, each of these guys had that storyline, I think, this season. So any one of them winning, I think, would have been a very poetic, because they were all very close to winning their seasons. So, but this in particular, I think, hit me hard, because that storyline is one that is more than just a story for me as well. That kind of impacted my life after Turks. So to have this ending for David, who I know is one of our best players and now will probably go down as one of them, everyone will remember him after this, I think is really great.
Yeah, I mean, this season, strategy, all that stuff aside, this has been a season of a lot of stories. I feel like I've really just enjoyed going in and reading these people talk about their last experiences and how they, how so many of them came up just short. We got so many people who were Final 2, Final 3, Final 4, 5, 6, so many people who had made it so close and could have had that win if they just done something different. And that was weighing, I think, on a lot of these people's shoulders throughout the season. And to see them really come in and play so hard, I mean, we would have had a great winner story arcs from, most of the players in the final 10, final 11 moving forward.
Right.
Most of them would have had great winner stories, to see their journey of where they first started and stranded and getting here. But I think David's in particular, I think you talked about it on a previous podcast, how if he had said no to this season, you might have even dropped doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we got several other no's that I really wanted, so he might have been the last straw, is where I was going with that.
Okay.
But yeah, no, he was someone who I knew needed a second chance, and I wanted him in this in particular, among some of the others. But those people all said yes. So, that was the big thing about this season. I wanted people who needed their time for this to be their time. And I think we got that. I think the final 14 on, we took some risks and we got some people who the timing didn't work out or didn't show up, but that's okay, because I think the merge on, we got exactly what I wanted out of an Austranded. I think that'll be it going forward. Made the point of this being more of an emotional season, and I think that is true for the players, but also people watching. I think it's just different. It wasn't like this. The first Austranded was very much a show. It was so over the top, and everyone was playing over the top and just having a blast. And it's one of my favorite seasons. No knock on that at all. This one just hits so different because it's so personal for these people, for a lot of them. Even Sharn, who's played in a million of them, this was his comeback after 4 years, something like that. So, and it's cool to see people like that play with some. That's the cool part about All Stars. You get these really personal stories about how Stranded affected different people over 14 years. And you just can't get that in other series. Maybe some, but not like that, And so for me, I love that. I think that's why I will do another Austranded, because I just think it's the unique part where we can have these people back, and it's fun to see who might be coming back. And maybe you don't know them because they played 10 years ago, but you finally get to meet them, and it's lots of different things going on. So I really enjoyed it. To sum up, I think some of our best gameplay, as always, some of our best emotional storylines. I hope these people had a really good time. I think that they did. I think all of the people have a lot to be proud of. I think I got everyone that I wanted to have a big storyline this season, at least had that. They at least got to make the merge, with the exception of some of the pre-merge people, but not, most of those were timing issues. But for the most part, I think, we got to see Sarah come back and make an impact. We got to see Michelle redeem herself as not just like Ziggy's shadow and under the radar second placer. We got to see Sharn show why she's the king of Stranded. We got to see David come back and make a name for himself here. And we got to see Tommy make a name for himself, where before he was just kind of known as the likable guy that was, duped by Missy, where now he's a power player, I think. So I'm really happy for these guys. I'm glad even someone like Gerard, who his storyline hasn't changed too much. We'll talk about the final two now as we try to wrap this up. Even someone like Gerard, I'm glad he got to come back. He got to meet all these people. I think he's a strong competitor. It's not like it was I do think David will win this pretty handedly, but it's not like it was a no contention.
Yeah, Gerard did not play this game badly.
Correct, right. And I think in a normal season, his game is probably a winning one.
Definitely.
It's just this season is tough.
I mean, I've been thinking about Gerard's game a little bit because I think I started off the season really, really high on Gerard. I loved reading all of his updates. I thought he put himself in an incredible spot in the early part of the game going into the merge. I thought, his positioning was phenomenal, and I was really excited to see how that would continue throughout the game. And I think because his positioning was so good, you kind of get in that dilemma where you don't want to do anything big because you're already in a good spot. The boots that are happening are working out well for you. He knew about the Kylie thing. He thought that would be good for his game for her to go, but him not to vote for her and betray her that way, which I thought was a good decision at the time as well, for him to kind of let that happen but not get blamed for it. But I don't think he ended up using that as well as he could have in the end game. Whereas David, who did similar moves where he was aware of things and hid his role in things throughout the season, I think he really capitalized on the opportunities he had, where I think Gerard let a couple of them slip. And that's really where the difference is coming here, because I think Gerard still played an amazing game. Yeah,
I think Gerard played a good social game and challenge game. I don't know about strategic necessarily. In other words, I don't think he was bad strategically. I just don't think he played like a very flashy game where David did. Mm-hmm. I do want to say David was super reserved for a majority of the season, to the point where he was playing safer than he ever had and more than he even wanted to. But he knew he had to lay somewhat low because he didn't want to be a huge target in the finals. And that's even why he kept Ben in longer than he should have, or they thought he should have. So we really saw the correction of David's game, where I don't know if Gerard had corrected his game enough from previous editions, where, it wasn't like he made the wrong move. He made the right moves in the final two. It's just, did he make enough moves to win? That's the problem. And I think Sarah was saying in Ponderosa, I don't want someone to win All-Stars that just was very likable.
Yeah.
And, I want to give Gerard more credit than that. I think he was aggressive when he needed to be, but not enough. And I think she made a point of, he was too safe too much of the time.
And then when he did push for a couple of things, he pushed Ben a few times. He really wanted Ben out. And I think his inability to influence those votes at those times, I think that really just showcased the difference between, again, final two of him and David. You're having to choose between the two. I think David, when he wanted something done, he got that thing done. And I think there were a couple of instances where Gerard did push for things, but couldn't figure out how to push for it in a way that was successful.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that I knew what Gerard's problem was going to be, and I was scared he was going to repeat that. I think he did. I don't know if it's necessarily the wrong thing, but it's hard because I don't know if he made the wrong moves. I just think he didn't.
Yeah, it's like I don't know what he could have necessarily done differently. Like a couple of jury management things, maybe. I know Matt's super bitter, just about the whole, well, you betrayed me, so I'm going to betray you. And then Matt's like, well, you knew about the Kylie thing, so you betrayed me for, that whole. When you get into trust and betrayal and stuff, things always get messy. But from like a game move standpoint, a strategic standpoint, I mean, I don't know what he should have done necessarily to like make a game-changing move or do something that could have put him in more of a winning position instead of an end game position.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where everyone else had an advantage that they played. I mean, everyone in the final 6 on had an advantage that they played or an idol that they played at some point, and he didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, he had a mystery box.
He had the mystery box, and
But he didn't use it.
That's right. I think if he had maybe used that in one of the creative ways he had the opportunity to, he could have pointed to that as his big move in getting someone out. And he had plenty of opportunity to do that. I even in that message laid out 2 scenarios where he could potentially use it. And if he had used that to get out a Ben or someone, that would have been his move he could point to. And I just don't think he had that. And you need that, because otherwise it's like, well, what did he do? I mean, he played a solid game, but specifically what moves did he make? And you can't really think of one right off the bat.
You've got that information you can choose to weaponize. He definitely played it safe by just telling a few people, to the point where, it actually ended up it didn't add a plus to his game. It added a negative to other people's games. Like when people were like, Daisy and Ben still don't know that there isn't a newbie. How can they not know after all this time? Weren't they doing the guesses? I think Kylie was saying something like that, when the only reason she found out there wasn't a newbie was because Gerard told her.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Like nobody did the guessing deduction to rule it out. Like Gerard just told them.
Hindsight's 2020.
And so the people who got their game knocked for it were just the people who Gerard never told.
It's also ironic because all those people thought that he was the newbie. Whereas if they had known there was no newbie, maybe, he wouldn't have even needed to worry about that. And I think it is also ironic that he wanted Ben out so badly, but I really think Ben might have been a better option for him to sit next to in the final 2.
Yeah.
It's hard though, because Ben also played he had moves to point to and other things, but at least I think Gerard's social game is much stronger than Ben's was.
Yeah, I think if Gerard had okay, here, I know we're getting short on time, but I think if Gerard had maybe, final 5, final 6 made the push against David or Sharn, and he had been responsible for those pushes, I think it'd be very different. Because then Ben wouldn't really have. Yeah, but he was so hyper focused on Ben. I think that might have been a detriment to him. Again, this is all hindsight. I think he played incredibly well. He was safe most of the time. His name was barely out there. Daisy really didn't want him, but I think she saw him as competition of her sort, where she didn't think she had much jury support and thought that he might be taking her spot.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I think the jury has been grilling these 2, Gerard and David, over the weekend. We're headed to final tribal in about 5 minutes. So
it's not going to be a unanimous vote, and that I'm happy about.
Yeah, I think that they both deserve some votes at least. So I look forward to it. I think very strong season. I think it'll be a very strong finish. And later tonight, we'll find out who wins. Doing a live vote reveal for the first time in a long time.
Whoa.
And tomorrow, we'll get to talk to all these guys about what the hell happened, their regrets, their mistakes, their favorite parts of the season. And we'll hand out some awards and maybe some special awards that we'll be coming up with just for this reveal, this finale. So with that, I want to thank you guys for listening all season. I think it's been a great season. I hope everyone involved had a good time. I think everyone did, with the exception of maybe one person, Jericho. But hopefully he comes around as he normally does and, is a good sport about it. Normally he is, so I'm hopeful. But
time helps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard when wounds are fresh, but otherwise I think everyone really enjoyed this. I enjoyed having them all back, and I'm glad they all got this experience. So with that, I think that's going to close us out for host podcasts until we get to talk to these guys and go over some awards. So I look forward to that, and thank you guys for listening.
Bye.
Bye.